What are traditional education or parents with traditional thinking? What are we overlooking?
I think a lot of it is the fact that we know that we are all individual in the way that we do things, but when it actually comes to day, you just kind of think, well, if I explain it to you like this, I understand it. So clearly, therefore, you're going to understand it. And we forget that we don't always explain things in a way that is understandable to the person that's we're talking to. And just to kind of like give some context, my initial background was early years and different learning styles because I always thought my oldest daughter might be mildly dyslexic. The school, she's nearly 28 now, and when I approached the school, they kind of said, well, dyslexia is an excuse for laziness, don't worry about it, kind of like. But when someone can spell, say, cat three or four different ways and not actually notice a difference, you kind of think, well, I'm sure that's not normal. And so I thought at the same time I was doing my degree, so I thought, well, if I can learn as much as I can about different learning styles, it'll hopefully I'll be able to use that information to help her, but at the same time, it will also support what I was doing in my degree. So alongside learning, working with different children who learn differently, I was looking into kind of like academically different learning styles and things, but I was also working with children in a residential unit who had autism that couldn't cope in mainstream schools. And I was also working in early year settings at the time. And everything I was learning was kind of saying, look, in order to learn, it needs to be engaging, it needs to be fun, the child needs to be relaxed. We all learn differently. And when it's pointed out to you, kind of, oh, yeah, that's obvious actually. But until it's pointed out of it, a lot of it you just kind of like presume is the case. And so, one of the things that I also learned along the way was the fact that if I just keep giving you worksheet after worksheet after worksheet to do, A, it's not inspirational at all. But also, what you're doing is you're just creating one memory. So, when a teacher suddenly goes, Jane, what is the answer to this? Your brain now only has one place to go to find that piece of information. It's frantically running around your head trying to
Mm.
find this information. But the odds of it doing it is actually quite small. Or if you're sat in an exam and a question comes up, again, you've only got one place to go to because by just repeatedly doing worksheets, all you're doing is making one memory stronger and stronger and stronger. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So when you can like when I took that information and took it alongside the fact that actually learning needs to be fun, you kind of, oh, okay. In that case, so if I give instead of just doing one thing repeatedly, if you give your child, the child, a variety of different resources in order to help them to learn, what you're actually doing is creating multiple memories. And so then when the teacher suddenly goes, Jane, what is the answer? Your brain now has multiple places to go to find that piece of information. So it's no longer reliant on just going to that one, being able to seek out that one place. And I think that's the main thing that we need to try and remember. Because I know when I was at school, and I know for a lot of people my sort of age, if we were learning the times tables, you'd just stand there and recite them by rote. It had no meaning or anything. It was literally just a case of parroting off the rhyme, which for some children works, but for a lot of children, it's just a case. And if I was then say to you, Jane, what's 5 times 6? You'd have to go, 1 times 6 is 6, 2 times 6 is 12, because it's not instinctive. It's just a rhyme that you've learned and you've only learned it that one way. Whereas if we use different resources and someone says, Jane, what's 5 times 6? You can then kind of like come straight up with the answer. And so it's remembering that. And also, it's
It's
a bit
interesting.
like many years ago when I was doing my GCSEs, which is the secondary school qualifications here in the UK. The teacher was stood at the front of the class, busy going through some form of algebra, and she was kind of saying, okay, so what I want to do is end up with this as the answer. So this says time, so I need to divide that, and this says add, so I need to subtract that, and la 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 la. And Dawn, what's the answer? I don't know. I say, oh, okay. And this says time, so I need to divide and blah, blah. And go, Dawn, what will the answer be? And again, because she just literally repeated what she had said, she could have been speaking a foreign language. I'd got no idea whatsoever.
Mm.
So that evening, I went home and said to Dad, look, we've been doing this in class and I just don't get it. And he wasn't a teacher, but he had the patience to sit down and speak to me as an individual and explain
Mm.
something in the way that I understood it. And I think that's, although that was kind of 30 odd years ago now, it's always stayed with me that just because you explaining it like that makes sense to you, it doesn't mean it makes sense to me. And very often, if I'm working with someone and they're still looking at me blank, it's not the fact that they are stupid, it's probably the fact that I'm not explaining myself very well. And I think that's something that we need to try and remember and take on board is the fact that we don't all understand the same thing in the same way. You need to be willing to adapt what you're saying so that it makes sense to the individual that you're working with.
Yeah, I think that's really such a valid point, and I think that's something that certainly we can appreciate even when we're looking at situations, not specifically as a parent or a teacher teaching a young child, right? It's something that you could
Mm,
see in just in day-to-day life, in communication, right? How
yeah,
oftentimes you feel that you're expressing yourself very clearly and the other person just doesn't get it, and you need to go back and think about, well, how do I reframe that? So I think that, bringing this into education, particularly into primary education, is really something very valid.